Welcome back to Building Extraordinary Brands, the podcast where we explore the art and science of creating standout brands and businesses. Today, we have an incredible guest whose expertise spans two continents, Australia and Europe. Ilya Lobanov is a seasoned brand professional known for transforming brands into unicorns. With over 20 years' experience, Ilya has elevated more than 100 companies through strategic brand design, from SaaS startups to 25-year non-profits. In his past roles, he's managed web teams and was affectionately known as the translator for his uncanny ability to communicate requirements between visuals and functionality. Today, he uses his multilingual skills in strategy, design, creativity, branding, and web to help founders and business owners build impactful, captivating, and meaningful brands. In this episode, we're going to dive into how brand values influence a company's culture, why brand strategy documents often end up in the trash, and how to effectively ideate, define, and capture brand values to create a meaningful impact. So welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jacob. Great to be here. Thanks for putting on this amazing conference.
Yeah, thanks for
together.
being here. I should mention to our listeners that we're recording this. You're coming in from the mountains in Russia and I'm in Australia. So it's a bit of a long distance to cover. So if there's delays, just bear with us. That's the reason why. But that aside, I just want to start off with your journey. Then we'll get into brand values and how we can actually get those values and use them for building brands. But do you want to just share a little bit about your journey, how your diverse experience has actually shaped your approach to brand building?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, I just asked Jacob about if I'm the only one that's had this many issues, and apparently I'm the black sheep. So. There's always the one person in the room. My journey in branding is kind of been an interesting one because, I guess I've intrinsically done branding since my first, graphic design job where I did like basically print label design, and then further into web experience, like user experience and strategy for websites and interactive kiosks and, Flash websites and animation. And I've always found that I was always trying. Yeah, I don't know if anyone remembers actually Macromedia Flash, if there's many people listening. But essentially, I've always found that I was always asking like, why are we doing this? Like, why are we doing this logo? What matters to us? Like, how can I communicate something that's a little bit different and unique? About your coffee shop or about your hospital or whatever, other than doing coffee cup or icon of like a cross. So I've always done, I always had that overarching idea behind me driving, all of my designs, even when I was just a graphic designer. And that's something that I do now with, brand strategy. I still do design, but now I'm more and more involved in the actual, coming up with strategies for driving brands forward.
Yeah, and you do quite a bit of things online. I didn't really mention this in your bio, but you run a community for helping designers and strategists level up as well, and you have a lot of educational content out there as well. So I'm just wondering, like, when did this transition happen from being like a designer to a strategist to an educator?
Yeah, I guess officially you can say that to get into brand strategy for me was I was transitioning from a web background where I've spent almost a decade in, and I was kind of seeking more of that overarching branding kind of role, and I got into a marketing agency role as an art director and then later as a creative director, and essentially was helping the founding managing director of that company to run workshops and strategies, and that's how I officially got into that. And as far as the education is concerned, I was then further about 5 years into the role. I was let go because, economy, I guess. And then I was found myself on my own, doing my own thing, set up Studio, which is my, branding agency and strategic agency. And then that's when I've also started creating content. Actually, I think probably about 6 months before losing my job, getting made redundant, I actually was putting together my very first course on Skillshare, just kind of capturing what I know about, positioning. It was called Intro to Brand Positioning, is the very first course. And I think ever since then, I think it was July 2016 maybe, or something like that, is when I kind of started creating content, and I thought, oh, people seem to resonate with this, and there's not that many people talking about it, so I guess that was my opportunity.
Yeah, so you're doing, sorry, I'm just like recapping everything. So you've gone from being a graphic designer more into a strategic role. You've got a web background, and then just by chance you got let go. That's kind of forced you into like a freelance role and an educational role, and that's kind of what you're focused on now. I guess the question from here is that I asked you, like, if we had an interview, what did you want to talk about? And you said brand values, and I was like, that's a great topic because we don't often talk about brand values, and they're often just a poster on a wall. And I do want to dig deeper into how we can actually use values to build brands that are authentic, and we're going to dive into this. So first off, like, why brand values? Why did you want to have a chat about that?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a few different things that I could have picked, from a topic perspective, from what we could have discussed in terms of brand strategy. But brand values is something that I've been focusing on lately, because what I've been noticing it in even putting together brand strategy documents with my clients, and even previously in my role. It's all well and good to put together a document that's has like this nice and shiny kind of positioning statements and brand values defined, and you send that off, or you create a presentation. You present that to the client loves it, or the CEO maybe loves it. Maybe the marketing manager, and then you're like, okay, great, and that's kind of your job done. From typically, when a client engages a brand strategist or a designer, that's kind of your role complete. But then when I, as a freelancer, someone running my own studio, I was then touching base with those clients, 6 months later, and kind of seeing how things are going. People were just kind of shrugging the shoulders, like, oh yeah, it's we've got that document, it's we loved it, and like that, you kind of go, okay, how are you actioning that? How are you putting that? How are you executing it? And a lot of times I found that it wasn't really being executed, or maybe not to the extent that I was hoping for. And coming back to brand values, I found that's a key component to be able to make sure that something happens, because brand values define actions of the brand, of the business, but ultimately it's the team's actions that it gets defined. And it's those team actions that drive the culture and that drive the strategy forward. And without that, you can't really, hope for a well-executed strategy at all. Basically, if the team is not on board, and if you have defined some actions and also define some, I guess, metrics for measuring the performance for the team, and defining how that will impact the culture. You can't hope for as a strategist, and you can't have good results. That I can't put any good case studies together without those.
Yep. So why are capturing values important for a company and its culture?
Yeah, it's important because you have to kind of sing from the same song sheet, kind of like it's always it's like a script, like if there's actors in the movie, everyone comes in to play a particular role, but if there's no script, like everyone kind of just does improv. There's a space for improv, in acting. But as far as putting together a movie, a specific script, if people don't know what they're meant to say or how they're meant to say it, what is the plot line, people kind of improvise, and it's all over the shop, right? Everyone's got their own
I love
opinion.
that metaphor.
It's like, what's that? I probably, you can't swear on this podcast, right?
You can try.
What is it?
You can
What's
try.
that? Oh, is there like a beeper? Like I don't.
Depends how much
beep me
effort I
out.
put into editing.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah, it's basically I forgot what I was going to say now, actually. But it's yeah. Ultimately, if people don't know what to say, it's going to be crap, right? There's no there's not going to be one single result, because everyone's going to want. I remember now. Everyone's got opinions, right? Like assholes. Like that. That was the opinions are like assholes. Everyone's got one.
There you go. We got there. I'm not going to beep that one out. That's definitely still PG. Kind of, maybe M. So let's talk about some examples though. So we're talking about why it's important, right? Because it gives you a script to follow, and every employee is not just following, their own script. So it keeps things consistent, cohesive, and the brand stays on brand. So can you share some examples of why companies, not why, but maybe let's talk about some examples of companies that have strong brand values and how they impact the culture?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of, typically when you search for things like that online, right, you're going to find like Nike and Apple
Yeah,
and,
the classic
I don't know, some of the
examples. Yeah.
bigger, some, yeah, I guess it's just the only trouble with that is that us, as brand builders, not all of us get to work with Coca-Cola and, the likes of, those big brands. Sometimes there's value in providing those examples. I try to keep it a little bit lower, something that's still recognizable, but to a degree, a little bit low key, I guess. Not necessarily to say that all of my examples are going to be like I love IKEA as a personal, like as a customer personally. The way their values. If you look at it on the first glance, they seem kind of generic, like they have togetherness and caring about each other and humanity and things like that. But when you visit their stores, like you experience walking through that maze, even though it's like a friction kind of thing, right, for you as a customer, you feel kind of homely, like the way that they put together the layouts, the way that the customers, the service representative, serve you and talk to you. You kind of feel like almost like a second home. Like for me, it's if I'm away from home, like from Brisbane, and I'm in another big capital city, I know if I go to IKEA, I can feel kind of that same vibe, no matter where I am, and feel that homely vibe. So that's something that drives culture. Like you can't have that feeling consistently unless the team supports it and in the everyday action support it. Another example for something that where culture is drives a brand, Skyscanner. So there's a brand that where you kind of ultimately purchase like airplane tickets and things like that. One of the brand values is they talk about diversity, supporting, making sure that they have different kinds of folks running behind the scenes. So what they do, they actually, as part of the actioning that as a brand value, they provide their employees, I think, up to 4 weeks of being able to work from any city. So you choose the city, they can send you there, and also they support you working, if you want to, from other locations where they have offices. So they have I don't know, they have offices across the world, so you can pick and choose ultimately and say, I can work, can I work from here for the next 6 months. So they support that, and also give you I'm not sure, I think there's up to one trip per year. They basically pay for you to have a trip, because they know that the diversity and you having those diverse experiences is what's going to help you as a team member, put that together in that diversity and understanding in your actions.
Okay, great. So we've talked about why it's important and some examples. I want to talk about some of the pitfalls, because often brand strategy documents just end up in the trash or collect dust online, like in folders on your desktop. So why do you think these documents just end up on desktops and not being used?
There's a kind of a thing that I read in Philip Kotler's book. So a marketing author. He talked about I think purpose and things like that from a brand perspective, but I think it applies to brand values too. He says if you want people to do something, within an organization, you can't do that without them participating in actually coming up with that plan or being involved in coming up with that plan. So if you just tell people, like I say, I'm a CEO and I say, okay, just do this, do that, do it this way. You as an employee, as a team member, you kind of go like, why? Like you either do it begrudgingly or you ignore, the rules because you don't understand why and why it's important. So the only way to make that happen, to make sure it's actually actioned, is to have them participate in coming up with that plan, right? So you have to ensure that they are part of the process. So that doesn't mean getting the whole entire organization in like a workshop or something, but at least a few key staff members that can drive different departments perhaps. That's why I have customer service representative, business development managers sometimes, marketing managers, and apart from just your CEOs and managing directors in those workshops, where you can ultimately ideate and get the voices heard from everyone.
Okay, so just reading between the lines there, it's making sure that all the voices are heard and that it trickles down from, not just from the top down, but everyone has to be aligned with, the values of the company and, what the brand stands for and like what the overall strategy is. But I guess the next question is like, what's the reason that these documents don't get used? And like, perhaps like, how can we actually make them get used and enforced?
Yeah. I mean, that's the reason why they don't get used. Is people don't feel like they're involved in the plan. It's in the way that you can make sure that they obviously involve some of those people and make sure that the voices are heard. I mean, that can be done through even team member interviews when you're performing your brand strategy, like workshops and your sessions. You can interview some key members, and then make sure that you actually use some of the language, some of the keywords, and some of the ideas, I guess, behind when you're putting back together the presentation. But ultimately, if we go back to the brand values, just using that piece as an example, you have to make sure that you define those in a very clearly defined and actionable way. So it can't just be basic words like togetherness and excellence. Unless you provide a very good reason, a very good explanation of what exactly that means on a team, day-to-day basis, and actually then put some metrics together in terms of measuring the performance of how well they're being executed. So for example, for me, I try to, as part of my engagement with my clients, and not everyone has the budget for this, but sometimes essentially what I try to get my clients to do is have an ongoing relationship with them, whether that's like a 6-month catch-up, regular catch-up every 6 months or so, where we do like almost like a brand update meeting or something. So where we'll go through, I'll help them define some metrics for measuring how the actions and how the brand values are being actioned. And actually, help them set up some rituals. That's how culture gets formed. You have to set up some rituals around the brand values, whether that's like a huddle where people talk about, hey, today, this is how I've acted on this brand value, today. Here's an example of my interaction with a customer or something, or here's an example of what I've done that's, informed by this brand action, like sharing kind of this, huddle every week or something. That could be a ritual. There's lots of different visuals and rituals that you can set up that help you make sure that it's kind of permeates, the whole kind of organization.
Okay. And what are some other mistakes that businesses make apart from just getting, buy-in from everyone, making sure everyone's aligned?
Yeah, too vague. Being with the brand values being just way too vague, and like I mentioned, the 10 values that every business must own or have for their company. I've done a content piece around this as like excellence, good service, being the best,
Trust, innovation,
quick service. Yeah, quality, all of those things is like, well, all of those things are already expected by most customers. It's not, we're not living in like 1920s or whatever, where there's like only so many, coffee shops or whatever. Probably there wasn't even coffee shops, but there's only ever so many blacksmiths and whatever that you could choose from. And so you didn't really have the need for, like, if you said you're the best, it was pretty much because you're like the only one, but nowadays people expect that kind of service. Like, they're not going to wait around waiting for you to improve. They're going to get to a Google search and find like another 100, of the same kind of services that you provide. So you have to make sure that you say something, like in terms of brand values, you have to stand for something that's a little bit more concrete and much more clearer and unique to you. So the mistakes of a brand value is being too vague, not being actionable, not being understood by people. So even if people don't participate in coming up with the values, if they can't understand how to action that, if they don't understand why they're doing that, that's a mistake of defining that in the first place. So you have to provide some. You're probably going to ask me this, but ultimately, when I come up with brand values, I give like a title for the brand value. Then I give a short 1-paragraph description of what that actually means, what's expected from a team member in terms of kind of like a day-to-day action that they could perform, and then ultimately give them a like a do's and don'ts as well. This means do this, not that. So there's no confusion. Sometimes people can misinterpret things, so you make sure that you're as clear as possible. And then give them some, maybe even examples of like how that might be measured, like an actual way to measure that value as well.
Yeah, I do want to get into like how to capture those values and extract them from clients, or if you're doing it as a team, like how do you actually get those authentic values that aren't like cliche? And is there a certain sweet spot? Is there like 3 values, 5, or have you found a sweet spot?
Yeah, I try to stick to 4 or 3. 3 or 4 is a good number. 3 is just a great number because it's 3 things is easy to remember. When you go to kind of 5 and above, you start to forget things. You're like, oh, what was that 4th value, or what was that 5th value? Certainly don't have 10. And some of my examples, by the way, like IKEA, I think they have 7 or 8, maybe. I mean, that's too many. I think it's just, I guess they have a big enough organization, and they probably have some kind of, ritual or something that brings those to life and make sure people remember it. So, for example, like just quick sidebar, a client of mine was working with, it was Amazon. They helped them put together some like care packs for kids. There's like a organization helping kids, and I think they went to the warehouse, and they basically have these values on huge posters in the warehouse, and they also have several. But they have also rituals to help employees remember those values. But for me, 3 or 4 is a good sweet spot.
Okay. And what kind of strategies are you using to define these values or get them out from a customer?
Yeah. Well, yeah. First of all, like I mentioned at the beginning, is making sure that you have at least a few different representatives from different departments. Whether you're a small company, you can have pretty much your whole company. Like I had 4 founders. The 4 founding members of the company, they came to me for putting together a strategy. So obviously all 4 of them are in the meeting. If it's an existing company, typically they'll have some kind of a customer representative, whether that's a key sales manager or a team lead of some kind. You want someone from a marketing perspective as well to be participant, because that's the person who's going to ultimately drive some of those things. CEO, someone who's going to have the final say, and someone from HR. If the company is big enough, a person from HR is like a key component to be a participant in some of these workshops, ideating the brand values, because they're the persons who's going to help measure some of these brand values as well. They know already what the culture is, most likely, and they'll probably already have some initiatives in terms of how they're doing, how they're making sure people are like don't do the wrong thing, basically. So you want, if there's a company that's big enough, and they have HR managers, have that person involved. The process I use is pretty simple. We, in a workshop scenario, one of the exercises I have focuses specifically on brand values. It's basically cards that I've developed, and the cards are kind of double-sided, where there are, each card is double-sided, but each side is kind of a positive, negative, if that makes sense. So it's like a quick, the opposite of, like the negative opposite of that would be slow, right? But it would be quick, on one side. On the other side would be something like, well thought, like, you take your time to take things through. So both are positive. They just happen to be kind of, almost opposite, if you like. So people tend to go through this and they'll kind of shortlist which are the most important to them as a team. They'll have discussions around that. I'll ask them questions like, why did you pick that one? Typically, if there's more than 5 people involved, we'll maybe vote on like shortlisting some of the values. So like blind voting works best because you can get people voting without other participants knowing who voted for which. That helps with like the shy voices who might not want to raise the hand when the loud CEO is speaking. So once you kind of shortlist a few, you kind of have a few conversations going around why people picked some of those values. You'll get a lot of golden nuggets. So the words themselves don't really matter so much. It's just I need to understand as a facilitator, why did they pick those values? Like, why are those values important to them? I ask them basically, if you had to stand behind this thing and you had to like basically prove why that's important to you, how could you do that? People will give you some ideas, even they would actually put that to life, or how they have put that through their interactions with customers. And basically from there, I will then go away and put together the strategic document, which typically involves putting all of the puzzle pieces together. So that's looking at the customer needs, looking at the vision and mission statements. Sometimes there's a purpose statement in there. Everything ultimately has to work together. So I kind of come up with 3 or 4 values based on other pieces. So they have to all work in tangent. It's like, you've seen that. I use the example of the Minority Report, the movie. I don't know if you've seen where Tom Cruise is kind of standing in front of this kind of like digital whiteboard, is swiping all these things and it's like, finding the putting all the pieces together. That's kind of what it looks like when I'm working on strategy. And I think for most of us doing this kind of work, that's what it looks like. You're trying to, put them together in a way that makes sense, and making sure that you take the personality, how they do things, what matter to them, everything in one, and then I kind of spit that out in some way, shape, or form. Typically, it's 2 or 3 words for each value, and then, like I said, I would explain what each means when I'm presenting that back to the client, and seeing, and hopefully you have the same kind of people who are present in the workshop, kind of present to kind of validate, yes, that's what you've kind of captured what we were talking about. At the end of the day, it's a creative exercise. There's always going to be back and forward, but ultimately that's the process. And once we have that, and that's kind of approved, if you like, then I would work together with my clients to put together some metrics in place, or ways to measure success. And like I said, if there's an HR manager, then you work with them very closely, trying to put together. It may even be something as important as hiring interview questions for employees that tie together to what matters to you, kind of thing. Also, the when people are being evaluated, like the performance reviews for their job, for their role, you can integrate some of those metrics as well, like how you're measuring against these brand values. Are you leading by example through these values? So that's something you work together on an ongoing basis and help a company actually action.
Thank you for sharing your process. I follow a similar process as well in workshops. And I think what you said about making sure everything works together, everything's aligned, is really important here, because values are just one aspect of a brand. And we haven't really touched on that. It's just one piece of the puzzle. You have to consider those other things you mentioned, like the purpose, the vision, the mission, your positioning in the marketplace, and what you want to be remembered for. Ultimately, they all have to work together. So it's it shouldn't just be done in isolation and plucked from the air. It really should work together, both for your business and the brand, considering who your customer is, who your competitors are, and how you're positioned in the marketplace, and how you're actually going to stand out and use those values effectively. So
Absolutely.
in our workshops, in the workshops that I hold, I sometimes, depending on the size of the company, I'll send a preliminary questionnaire, and often I'll ask around what their opinions of the value. Ask their employees what their thoughts are on the current values, just to see where there are patterns or misalignment. And
Yeah.
it's crazy because you'll get so many answers back that are just not aligned at all. So you can see where the disconnects are. But what you mentioned around asking why and understanding why they've said this is really important, because that is where you're going to get those insights. It's like, well, what made you say this? Like, what's given you in this impression? And you can use that and compare it against someone else who said something entirely different. It's like, well, why is there a disconnect here? Like, maybe it's someone from HR and it's someone from sales. Like, there's a disconnect. So you have to uncover why. And maybe you interview a customer and there's a different perspective entirely. So it's like, there's some conflict going on here and we have to figure it out. There's things unaligned. So you can use those insights to effectively, come up with values that are going to be where you want to be and what you want to be seen for. And that's really where the magic happens. It's like you get all these insights and then you make a plan on how you can actually live those values and play it out. So I'm not sure your thoughts on that, Ilya.
Yeah, 100%. If you just send a questionnaire, like what you've mentioned, sending through kind of a preliminary questions to kind of gauge where people are at. That's kind of what I do as well. My questions that I ask them tend to vary depending on the organization and the amount of people working there. But that's a great way to get your understanding as a facilitator. Okay, what can I focus on? Like, there's a disconnect here, so you really make a big focus around that. But certainly, if you don't want to rely on the questionnaires, right? You want to bring that in and discuss that, because that's where the value goes, right? So if I just did the exercise like I mentioned, where we picked the cards and they said, okay, these are the 5 values we like and we shortlist, and I said, okay, great, let's move on to the next exercise. That would be equivalent to me just sending a questionnaire and saying, what should our values be? And then just like, running through that word cloud, tool to speak the most common ones, say, these are your brand values.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the actual value of you being like as a facilitator. You have to understand the insight. You get the insights. Without those insights, you can't really put anything together. Another great couple of questions you can ask in addition to doing the kind of the brand value exercises and asking them why, and then kind of getting some discussions going, is asking people kind of around the room to share an example of share an example of an interaction with a customer where a team member did that shows like the best of you at work, kind of thing. Your best for like, what's the best version of you? What's an example of that? Can you share something that's happened recently? And that can give you a lot of insights too. They can share sometimes they'll share bad examples, like, oh, we did this recently. That certainly wasn't a good example of us, putting the best foot forward. But also you'll get some interesting anecdotes and you can get some insights from that as well. You can do the same thing in the exercise that I mentioned with the values. So if they pick, like 5 people said, we value quality or whatever, you go, okay, you go around the room and say, can you give me an example of where that's happened, on a day-to-day basis, maybe an interaction with a customer or something, and then they'll share, those examples with you. And that's where you get the insights to put together the brand documents. And that's also the key to getting them actioned, because if you just regurgitate what they've said to you, you ultimately, you're a waste of space as a facilitator.
Yeah. What's the point?
And like I saw this, I think Alex Smith is on your podcast or part of the conference.
Yeah, this week. Yep.
Yeah, so I saw he's on LinkedIn. He shared, I'm not sure, he shared an author, like a snippet of a book he was reading, I think, where someone talks about the consultant, hiring a consultant. And it said something along the lines of, a consultant is a person who knows to provide back the solution to whoever hired him, but not bite the hand that feeds him. In other words, just agree with everything that CEO said and just regurgitate back. That's not how you want, your strategy documents to look like. And that's the reason why they won't get action, because if you just say the same thing that they've told you, what's the point of you?
Did you want to share an example that you've worked on? If you've gone, worked on the branding for a company and you've extracted some really powerful values and made them live it. Like, what comes to mind as a client of yours?
Yeah, I mean, the client that I've worked with most recently, and it's been a long-term client of mine. I work with a Sydney organization helping kids. Battle is the wrong word, but kind of help them through cancer. So kids that have been diagnosed with cancer, they help those families and those kids through various ways. So I've been working with them for a long time, putting together the strategy documents and the brand values. And one of the values, for example, is seek and offer help. And it's actually something that was a big kind of turning point, I think, for the organization, because before, for 25 years they've existed, they've done kind of things where the culture was just figure it out, like don't ask me, just figure it out on your own. And so there was a lot of there's no kind of authority, but I guess there was not a lot of what's the word, guidance, in terms of how to do certain things. And there was there was very little belief in getting external help. So people didn't, there was a culture of not asking for help, even if they wanted to. So as a result, you had kind of subpar results. So, and so one of the values that we've put together is seek and offer help as a new way of going forward. Because branding a lot of times is not necessarily how you are right now, but how you want to see yourself in the future, what's going to help with that. And so, there's a way to action that. They have, it basically, they go through weekly huddles. They talk about like raising the hand, I need help with this, or this is a area I'm struggling with. Can you help? Can someone help me with this? Or the opposite. They might say, hey, I'm a bit light on this week. Is there anyone that needs help? And it's defined basically.
Is this, sorry to interrupt, is this something that you identified as a problem to begin with, like as part of their culture, that people didn't want to speak up, and like that was?
Yeah, it was certainly, I wouldn't say it was a problem. It was just more of a case of, that came up as an insight from me going through their workshops and interviewing some of the team members, is that was just the culture and something that they wanted changed. So a lot of people was saying like, we want to change, but we just not have the guidance. We don't know, like, and that's actually also a good way to have kind of everyone involved, say in the workshop, because you as a facilitator can kind of bring that to the attention of, say, the CEO or the managing director or the, whoever, some kind of director typically who holds maybe some old way, holds on to the old way maybe, to actually have, some of the team members, they have the opportunity to voice their concerns a lot of times. And a lot of times the, business owners and CEOs, they want to improve things, right? And everything that you can put together that will help improve them in the end result, they're going to the most open CEOs hopefully will listen and take that on board. So yeah, it was not so much of a problem, just more of a, hey, this is something area we're looking to change and improve. So and actually hence why they came to me, because they said this is actually was our first almost like trial of asking for help externally, because before, like, we used to do our own social media, we didn't know what the hell we were doing. This is our first time, like, we actually reached out to an expert in an area where, like, we understand this is an important thing, that we need to change.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Was there anything else you wanted to add before we wrap this up? In terms of values?
No, I just I think people are going to have get lots of value from this conference. I can't believe it's free. That should be the tagline. So it's an amazing thing that you're putting together, and I hope it goes really well. As far as the other brand builders, listening to this, like you mentioned, I do have a community that I'm putting together, and I'm actually revamping it. So I've had kind of like my 20 founding members of the community, and based on that feedback, I'm now re-looking and revisiting what that looks like to make sure that I'm providing what people actually want to learn and what people want to be a part of. So I guess keep your eyes peeled if something that you're interested in.
Okay. And where can people connect with you and learn about that?
Best place to connect with me is through either LinkedIn or Instagram. Just find Ilya Lobanov on LinkedIn, or We Are Studio on Instagram. You'll see me with the purple backgrounds on my avatar, and it's kind of the same ones that probably I think Jacob uses, that you use on the the speaker kind of thumbnails. Only for some reason I've got a tie on.
Have you got a vest in that one? I just remember you as the vest all the time.
No, I think I have. It's just a black shirt, like something that I'm wearing now. The vest was actually like a branding thing of mine that I used to wear. But right now, like you mentioned, I'm up in the mountains. It's lots of things are still in boxes, and so my vest is somewhere that I can't really get.
Yeah, you've definitely owned the vest. There's no one else that comes to mind when I think of vests. So.
Great, I should lean more into that.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe I'll get a pink vest. It was a pleasure chatting to you, Ilya. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge around values, and I'm glad we could make this work, even despite you being in the mountains and me being in Oz. Yeah, we got there in the end.
Yeah, thanks so much for the invitation. Really honored to be a part of this.
Thank you, mate. Cheers.
Building extraordinary brands.